Many of you probably took the time to watch the coronation of King Charles. So today, what I'm going to do is we're going to be taking a look at the chart of the coronation of King Charles. So this should give us a little bit deeper of an understanding of what the reign of King Charles will look like, what are going to be the strengths, and what are going to be some of the weaknesses of this time that King Charles is king. So, for those of you that are new to my channel, make sure you like and subscribe, hit the notification bell so you can get all of my videos. I do videos on the royal family, monthly predictions. So, make sure you are getting all those updates. Also, I am running a special for the month of May, 40% off of all my readings if you use codename Thor at checkout. So let's go ahead and take a look at the astrology chart of King Charles, just so you're all aware, or sorry, this is the coronation day chart. So you're all aware this is Vedic astrology, not Western tropical astrology. That's why the chart looks a little different. Also, this is going to be a disclaimer. This is for entertainment purposes only. These are all speculations and allegedlys of King Charles's birth or coronation day chart. All right, so let's take a look at the chart. Interestingly enough, King Charles is a Cancer, and his birth chart is actually Cancer as well. So that actually remained the same. So the idea is Cancer, Cancer people tend to be very empathetic, they tend to be empathic in a lot of ways. But the one thing I did want to point out is if we take a look at the condition of moon in King Charles's chart, you'll notice that the moon is debilitated in the sign of Scorpio, the fifth house. So that's kind of interesting. Moon shows where we're comfortable, in life. The fifth house does have to do with the royal court, celebrity, being in the public eye, those kind of things. So he has a certain amount of comfortability there, but, you know, moon is going to be debilitated. So there is this idea. And when I'm looking at the chart, I feel like being able to really portray that empathy is going to be a challenge for King Charles. So there's a difference between and there's a fine line, I think, when you're a leader. It's like you kind of have to have this very serious demeanor, to help people feel confident in you. But then at the same time, you have to express empathy for people that are going through difficult situations, and connecting with the everyday people. That may appear to be difficult. Okay, just connecting with everyday people and looking sincere with moon being debilitated in the sign of Scorpio. Also, this does show a lot of past life karma with this placement. Now, interestingly enough, if I was just looking at a regular birth chart, not a coronation day birth chart, fifth house does represent children, especially your first child. So this could represent, from the perspective of King Charles, there is a special focus, or there's a special place in trying to make sure that Prince William is being taught, properly so that he can be prepared to be king one day. So I do feel like there's a special place in his heart for that. All right, let me clean up the chart. You'll notice that Rahu and Ketu, remember Ketu represents past life influences. Rahu indicates where the soul is really trying to, develop in this current lifetime. Look at where it's at. It's in the 10th house. And this is what we would expect, for somebody becoming king, for somebody becoming president, any type of leadership role. You usually expect that either the first house is going to have a lot of planets in it or the 10th house. And you'll notice that Sun is exalted in the sign of Aries. So this shows a natural authority. I do feel like he's been prepared most of his life for this. And this is really going to come out that he's quite natural at this. So even though he might seem a little bit cold sometimes with moon being debilitated in the sign of Scorpio, there is this natural authority that's being projected as well. Okay. So I think finding a balance is going to be one of the challenges with this placement. Now, Rahu shows that there's a certain amount of inexperience from the soul level, even though there's experience with royal courts because of Moon being in the fifth house. Maybe in past lives, King Charles may have not actually been at the top level, actually being king. But I do feel like he had experience in royal courts in past lifetimes. So there is a certain amount of fear there. Rahu represents a certain amount of fear or anxiety. That's sorry, there was a fly there. uh Fear or anxiety because we're inexperienced. So I do feel like, this is a very tense moment. Those of you that were watching the coronation, I do remember there was a video shot of King Charles was either in a car or a carriage, and he looked like he was, kind of stressed out about the whole thing. So this is like a really big deal to him. I mean, I'm sure it would be a big deal for anybody, but this is really like, this is it. This is what he's been training his whole life for. That's with Rahu in the 10th house. Now, Jupiter being there is a certain amount of, and this makes me think of being, head of the Church of England in a lot of ways. There is this natural authority figure type of vibe that's happening with Jupiter being in the 10th house. So he's providing moral guidance. So, despite whatever past indiscretions have taken place, now he is the moral authority, and he's got to keep up that role. That's what, Jupiter in the 10th house is like. I better keep up this role. I better be like on my best behavior. I better be projecting the face of somebody who's in charge of the Church of England. Okay. So that's very much being demonstrated with Jupiter in the 10th house of Aries. The one thing I did want to point out with Mercury being retrograde, those of you that are aware, I did find it a little interesting that he was being coronated during Mercury retrograde. I do feel like, as far as, we think of King Charles being this progressive person that's trying to bridge the gap between the royal family and what it's perceived in the past, and trying to bring it more into this modern age, this age of democracy and things like that. He's really trying to preserve the institution, but make it more modern at the same time. I feel like there is going to be difficulty with expressing that throughout his reign. Okay. So with Mercury being retrograde, it does feel like the narrative or the message may be garbled a little bit. Okay, so maybe he intends, and I feel like all the intentions are good because we have Sun there in the 10th house and it's exalted, but maybe the actual message doesn't quite get out to the public as well as he would like. So that's one of the difficulties I do see with this placement because of the retrograde nature of Mercury. It's like the planet is not fully being understood. It's not being fully expressed. So there's some difficulty there, especially when we're talking about being able to communicate with the everyday person or the common person, the everyman, right? One of the other things I wanted to point out was with Saturn being in the eighth house, this could show some of the challenges that are going to be happening during the reign of King Charles. Okay, so the eighth house has to do with sudden, explosive events, crises types of events, traumatic events. We are likely to see during the reign of King Charles some very emergency type events. Okay, whether this be a financial crisis, eighth house does represent bankruptcy and things like that. It represents natural disasters. It can even represent things like, various types of conflicts. But I do feel like that is one of the karmic obstacles that are going to pop up during the reign of King Charles. Okay, he's going to be faced with this huge crisis. Okay, and there's even this idea the eighth house can represent things like revolution and change, not like necessarily like French Revolution or something. But there could be this idea of things need to change, maybe more so than he really wants to admit. And there's some resistance there. So this is the fear. So remember, Saturn represents our fears. So there's this resistance to change. Okay. Maybe the monarchy does need to make some really deep changes, but there's like, you know, there's this deep change. If we look at King Charles's actual birth chart, he's got Saturn in the second house, which is indicating a preservation of old world values. Okay. So he doesn't really want to fundamentally change things. He probably wants to make more superficial changes, but there might have to be actually a more of a fundamental change, especially right now in the world. We're facing like a cost of living crisis. A lot of people are having difficulty affording housing, healthcare in the US at least. And then even food insecurity is raising its head. So there is this idea of there might be this pushback from the public of viewing the monarchy as having this excess. And I think that's always been the problem with when you're looking at everyday people versus the monarchy. There's always been this dynamic of give and take. How much do we allow? What is each side comfortable with? And I think that's going to be one of his main issues. And I do feel like there's going to be a crisis. Okay. It could be an economic crisis. It could be some sort of national emergency. Okay. Or world emergency. In fact, it could be a world, when we're thinking about the Commonwealth, could be a world emergency because we have Mars here in the 12th house. Okay. Remember, the 12th house represents foreign lands. So anything that we consider foreign is the 12th house. So when Mars is there, there is this idea of trouble in foreign lands, trouble in foreign countries. Okay. So that the crisis may actually emerge from foreign countries with Mars being in the 12th house. But there's also a lot of support from foreign countries as well, because Venus is in the 12th house. So it's not entirely bad. There's, some difficult circumstances, but Venus is there too. So there's a lot of love and support coming from foreign countries as well. So this is going to be quite an interesting reign. The other thing I want to point out, and this was, really a fast kind of generalized chart read. If you look at where K2 is in King Charles' chart, it's in the 4th house here. The Coronation Day chart, I want to make that clear. Coronation Day chart. In the 4th house right here, the 4th house represents things like homeland. It does represent patriotism. Okay, so what's interesting is the 4th house is like your roots. It's like the people. So I do feel like there's a little bit of a disconnect there. Okay, there is a disconnect. K2 shows a certain level of apathy. Maybe there's actually a strong interest in what's going on in foreign lands, and maybe not enough attention is paid to people living in his own country. Okay, that might come up as an issue. There might be an emergency that's like kind of worldwide, and maybe domestic concerns are kind of put on the back burner. And I know what some of you are going to say. I know the king's not the prime minister, he's not the cabinet, and he's not the parliament, but he does have a certain, if we want to say, he does have a certain influence. So maybe he could be more influential in a positive way in domestic affairs. Like maybe if you really, like, for example, I saw this recent thing about Rishi Sunak was being interviewed, and I think it was Piers Morgan was really trying to press Rishi Sunak on this idea of the nurses having to pay for their parking. Okay. And, from an everyday person perspective, that kind of seems ridiculous. Like, why would our first responders or the people that are helping, so much with the healthcare system have to pay for their parking? Well, this is something that if King Charles wanted to really spearhead, he could come out and make a statement. Maybe it would make Rishi Sunak frown, but he can make a statement like, I don't think the nurses should be paying for their parking. It would be something where he's focusing actually on a domestic concern. But with this chart, I don't see that happening. Okay, so I don't see that happening, and that might actually be some of the issues that I see, because of Mercury being retrograde. Don't forget that Saturn is in the sign of Aquarius. Okay, so I think one of the biggest issues besides the miscommunication is going to be this issue of Aquarius is the natural 11th house. It's going to be this disconnect with everyday people. That's going to be that's going to be one of the core issues I see in King Charles's, his reign, is this disconnect with everyday people. And this is not necessarily that he himself is disconnected, but it could be that it's not perceived because this, like, look, Mercury's retrograde. People are not perceiving it. People maybe are perceiving that, he's like, there's this like window of separation, there's this like separation that's happening between everyday people and the monarchy. So that's going to be, again, maybe all monarchies have faced this problem, but this is going to be one of the core issues I see during this reign based on the coronation day chart. So that's what I got for you so far. Just a few ideas and a quick look at the coronation day chart of King Charles. Thank you all for watching. Comment down below. Let me know what you think. And I appreciate your comments. Let me know what other videos you'd like to see me do. And I will see you in the next video.